Um, so everything starts with us as caregivers. So I assume, maybe Mark, you can tell by the names out there, but I assume some of you are professionals and there are some parents out there?
I believe, yes, we have a mix. Yep.
Good, 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 good. So it's important for us as caregivers, professionals, or parents to have the right attitude. I want to talk to you a little bit about sort of understanding why kids have these moments of really difficult behavior with anxiety, frustration, meltdowns. When we understand it in the right way, we can get better outcomes, right? And if we understand things in the right way, we're more likely to be calm ourselves, less likely to hit that panic button. If we can be chill, we can help the kids that we work with be chill, right? If we're not chill, we tend to make things worse. That is, if we get very upset and raise our emotion levels, emotions are contagious, we often make things worse. So we're going to talk about how do we think to be chill, and then we can talk about the art of de-escalation. How do we, in the middle of a crisis, soothe somebody, not punish somebody, which is likely to make it worse, but how do we sort of help that person sort of de-escalate and calm down? I don't want to just talk to you about that, which is crisis management, but then the last piece of this is how do we create prevention plans for the types of things that set kids off? And we'll talk about 7 or more common categories of triggers that set kids off and creating prevention plans for each of those. We won't talk about all the prevention plans today, but we will between this session and the next session that I do. So how does hope impact parenting? Why do I bring up this issue of hope? And the reason is a couple things. One, a former supervisor of mine when I was in grad school, then a colleague of mine, a gentleman named Mark Durand, he wrote a book called Optimistic Parenting, and he reviewed some of this sort of ongoing studies he did of kids with autism from the ages of 3 to 6 years old. And he wanted to see what would be most predictive of how aggressive they were at home. And the more, he figured the more aggressive they were at 3, that would be the best predictor of how aggressive they would be at 6. But that wasn't the case. If you have a really aggressive wild kid at 3, it doesn't mean you have to have an aggressive wild kid at 6, okay? He thought, well, the lack of language, right? Many of you may be speech therapists. We often think if someone can't communicate, they're going to get frustrated and more aggressive. Well, that was somewhat predictive, but not the most predictive thing. The most predictive thing was parental optimism or pessimism, parental attitude, the extent to which parents believe they could change their child's behavior. Because when we have hope that things can get better, we start to see things as problems that can be solved, behaviors, issues, and challenges that can be solved. And what it means to have hope is that when this really difficult behavior is in front of you, you think it's temporary. It doesn't have to be a forever thing. You know, sometimes an autism diagnosis can be a lifelong diagnosis, but a specific behavior doesn't have to be forever. Also, the behavior is a specific issue, like maybe the youngster is missing a particular skill, doesn't know how to handle something. It's not a character flaw. Character flaws are when we think, you know, we think permanently about it. So when I hear parents say, he's just like his father, he's just like his mother, I worry about that because then we're putting on this personality. And it's really about, wait, maybe this kid doesn't know how to get attention in good ways. We've got to teach them a better way. So the first order of business is all of us have to think when this really difficult behavior occurs, it's temporary. It's a specific behavior that we can teach. It's not just a personality issue. Get everybody on board on the team to believe that. And then the next thing we do, we need to frame the problem as not like this kid's doing it on purpose, right? When we start to think people are manipulating us and they're doing it on purpose, we get angry. It escalates us. The problem is, should be defined as a gap between the demands we place on that child and their ability to cope. It's not the kid's fault that he's doing it on purpose. It's not the teacher's fault that she's teaching the wrong way. It's nobody's fault. The problem lies between the demands we place on that youngster and their particular coping skills. And that means that now defines this problem in a solvable way. We've got to modify the demands that we're placing on that kid and teach him or her a better way to cope. Now, let me just see something. I noticed while we're talking, a question came up.
Oh, yeah. That's
Oh,
just to let them know that, yes,
yeah.
this will be accessible to families. I will make the link available in the Autism Drive, and I'll send out the link to those who are here for the PD, so they'll have access to it to share
All right. Now information about this being recorded is now being recorded. So
out.
that's part of the presentation. So the issue I just talked about kind of leads us to think about the issue of discipline versus educating. Many of us grew up with traditional discipline. You misbehave, you get punished, you behave right, you get a reward, and that's what it's all about. Many of us went to grad school to learn to be teachers years ago, and they taught us to, you know, if the kid says something wrong, you put a check mark up, then you call their parents, then there's a consequence, and, you know, one size fits all discipline approach. And so here's the deal. It still can be pretty effective for regulated kids, for well-regulated kids. If a kid is not emotionally out of control or dysregulated, they understand the logic that bad things will happen if they can continue to misbehave, and good things will happen if they behave. But it doesn't work very well for dysregulated kids, people who have get emotionally out of control in a repetitive kind of way. Those are not kids who necessarily respond to the logic of consequences immediately. They're certainly not in an emotional state. And so if we end up in a power struggle trying to discipline somebody who has emotional dysregulation issues, some kids on the spectrum, kids with severe ADHD, mood disorders, anxiety disorders, we often make things worse. The problem just escalates. We're adding fire to fire. And so at that point, we have to stop and ask, why is this happening? Get to the bottom of it. What's triggering the kid? How do we modify the demands that triggers this meltdown? And how do we teach them a better way to cope? So I thought I'd show you a quick Super Nanny video. Mark, you'll tell me if you hear the sound, because we originally put the sound on. Hopefully it's still on. I wanted you to see this because every Super Nanny video sort of has in it the same component, every Super Nanny TV show, which is when kids misbehave, don't follow the rules, they get the traditional discipline, timeout. I don't have a problem with timeout. It can work very well, but it can also backfire. Like if a kid doesn't want to do their work, kid doesn't want to do something, and you send them a timeout, they successfully avoided doing it for a longer period of time. It could backfire. But more importantly, when kids are chronically dysregulated, locking them up in a timeout can actually make things worse. They're not necessarily learning. They're just getting traumatized. And so I wanted to show you this video, and you think about, if you're a mom, how would you deal with this really difficult behavior that her little son Joseph is showing her? She uses timeout. I'm not advocating that you do that. What I'm going to ask you is what happens, when timeout doesn't work. Let's take a look at this. Apparently it's okay to drag them by the, armpits across the floor into a timeout room. Listen, not my cup of tea, not what I would do. But on the other hand, for a lot of really well-regulated kids who don't have repeat challenging behaviors or emotional challenges, maybe that would work okay. And if it ain't broke, don't fix. I'd let it be. But if I had a youngster who was chronically dysregulated and they were in timeout and it wasn't making things better, when they were on a reward chart, not making things better, then we have to stop making it worse. Because sometimes dragging them to timeout actually escalates the problem for those dysregulated kids. And we have to stop, ask, why is it happening? What are the triggers? And therefore, then what do we need to teach this kid? So for Joseph, right, the trigger is he's being ignored. He's not getting attention in that video from Super Nanny and from his mom. They're looking at the angelic daughter who never misbehaves. They're talking to her, and lo and behold, he hits his sister on the ankle. Maybe it's also a time of the day he's very dysregulated at the end of the day. So he hits his sister, and of course things escalate as they try to drag him into timeout until they eventually sort of break him like a horse and get him to, cooperate with that. But the real issue is, like, if he doesn't know how to get attention in good ways, how do we teach him to do that? So maybe mom says, hey, Joseph, if you want my attention, you don't hit your sister, just say, I need you, mom. But she doesn't want to reward a tantrum. So she says, but I'm going to work with your sister now for 3 minutes on a timer. Here's a timer. When the timer's up, I want you to say, Mom, I need you. You can work on this puzzle while you're waiting for me. So she makes him wait a little bit, and then they try it again. What are they doing? They're teaching him a better way to get what they need. What is therapy? What are you doing with your students? What are we doing with our own kids? We're teaching them a better way to get what they need. We want to educate, not just be disciplinarians. Oops, I missed something here. So a little background on that, so we understand why am I talking about dysregulation, right? We've got, why do people get upset really easily? Why do we say they have really low frustration tolerance and they get emotionally hijacked, just out of control? So all of us have a limbic system. It's the part of our brain that controls our fight, flight, or freeze response when we are threatened, right? We're ready to throw down, to fight, to run and hide, or to freeze and like shut down with anxiety, depression until the coast is clear. We call that the Incredible Hulk when I talk to kids. That's the language I use. Because many of them have seen that. So we talk about the Incredible Hulk is sort of your life-saving part of your brain that just takes over when you're threatened. The forebrain, this part of the brain, is what we call Dr. Banner, the logical, scientific, or legal mind. You know, this is the part that acts like an attorney or a scientist and figures out how to solve problems, figures out how to negotiate with words like a lawyer does. And that's the Dr. Banner part. Now, the problem is when we are sufficiently threatened and overwhelmed, the Hulk can hijack the whole brain, so the Dr. Banner disappears, right? Just like in the original Marvel comics, when he was threatened enough, Dr. Banner's gone, and then the Hulk comes out. And of course, as you know, the Hulk is limited in his repertoire. Hulk smash, Hulk run, Hulk hide. Hulk doesn't consider all the options for problem solving and consult some of the experts in the field. That is not in the repertoire of the Hulk. So when somebody is the Hulk, you know, what is best to do? Should we bring military assault helicopters and threaten the Hulk? If you don't, you know, put that car down, we're going to shoot bullets through you and kill you. When we threaten the Hulk, we get more Hulk behavior. What actually helps the Hulk? Anybody want to share? Put it in your chat. Type it in your chat. You've seen the movies. Who or what helps the Hulk? Anybody? Have you not seen the movies?
The Black Widow.
Scarlett Johansson.
Thanks, Jen.
Scarlett Johansson. Exactly, guys. Here's the deal, man. When your kid is the Hulk, you've got to be Scarlett Johansson. I wake up in the morning a whole lot of times thinking, I don't know who I'm going to see today, but there could be a meltdown, and I got to know that I am a trusted, attractive actress from a previous episode. That's what Scarlett Johansson is. She has the trust of the Incredible Hulk. How do you have the trust of your students and of your own kids so that when you approach them, they don't think it's going to get worse? They know that you're going to try to help them figure this out, calm down, solve it, okay? So that kind of brings us to what we want to do here during crisis management. First of all, let's not threaten the Hulk further. Let's not make it worse, right? There's a couple of things that sort of build trust. And one of them is nonverbal skills, right, to increase safety, meaning don't get in their face, don't raise your voice, don't always make direct eye contact. I had 2 kids in my class. They were starting to say, I'm not doing work. They're starting to complain. I'm not doing this work. I hate this. And I knew one of them had a history of really out of control, Incredible Hulk behavior. Well, I don't go right up in the face of that one and start saying, you need to do your work now, because I know what'll happen. She's going to spit at me or pinch me or run out the room or something. I'll get more Hulk behavior. On the other hand, the other kid who's just imitating her is actually not the Incredible Hulk. He's a pretty compliant kid. And I actually could go right up to him and say, excuse me, young man, you need to do your work now. Do I need to call your mom? Like, I can make the fake phone call. I can be a little threatening, a little tough. And that actually is going to work for that kid, but not for the Incredible Hultress. For the Incredible Hultress, I have to say, well, I'm going to be over here. I got some work to do. You know, let me know if you need some help. And I just try to get out of their way for a moment and not be a threat. Then we need to sort of listen, agree, and apologize to sort of calm the moment during a crisis. So what does that mean? So the Incredible Hultress in that classroom hit the other student. And usually we don't have time for that. I want to send them out. But I'm going to ask the question, hey man, what's going on? You know, I listened to their side of the story. Well, he took the last cupcake for our cupcake party. Okay, so giving people their day in court kind of calms the moment, right? Obviously, this listen, agree, and apologize is for more verbal kids, right? I'll show you what we do for less verbal kids in a second. But for verbal kids, we agree with them too. Like, you're right, that's terrible. He took your cupcake. You know, it's not okay for you to hit him, but you're right. He shouldn't have taken that cupcake. And then apologize. I'm so sorry he took that cupcake, right? All of that helps to de-escalate. And then the third issue is collaborate, AKA another word for, how do I teach you a better way to get what you need? So if it's a verbal kid, now, you know, I think what you're saying is you really wanted a cupcake, right? You should know the cupcake that guy took that you thought was yours. That was a nasty, horrible cupcake. I saw it. It was like the oldest cupcake out there. I can get you a better cupcake, but you got to work with me. No more hitting, right? Let's talk about how we get a good cupcake. I can bring in a good fudge one. Now, if I have a less verbal kid who doesn't respond to my language, I might use a choice board. In the middle of their screaming rage, they're hitting and throwing, and I bring over a choice board that says, right, I want a break. I want to go to my, break room. I want my snack. I want my, my favorite book, or whatever it is that they want. I had a kid like this. We were teaching him to play with other kids, and every, I don't know, maybe 8 seconds in, he would just like pick up anything like a scissors, a stapler, books, and just throw it. And it was pretty dangerous to be in the class. We had to cover up everything, hide everything. Well, it turned out often when we were trying to play with other kids, he would either get bored, or he just wanted to play a different game, or he was just done socializing and he needed a break to be alone and do some sort of self-soothing things. So we put all the pictures of those options on a choice board, pictures of other games, pictures of his break area with soothing activities. And when we start to get upset, we'd quickly come over before he could throw something. I want, and he could point to what he wanted, a better way to get what he needed. Now, sometimes all logic is gone. We bring that choice board over to the kid, and what do? They pick up the choice board and they toss it across the room. Or the verbal kid says, I don't care about you getting me another cupcake now. I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill his parents. I'm going to kill the cousins. I'm going to kill them all. And so when all logic is gone, distraction is our crisis tool. So right now, I'm just talking about crisis management. I'm not talking to you right now about getting ahead of these problems. I'm just talking about not making it worse. And so when all logic is gone, we think, what can I do to soothe and distract that individual? So I think of 3 categories of distracting and calming. A novel item, something they've never seen before. So I remember playing this game. It might have been tic-tac-toe in a classroom, a self-contained class some years ago. And this kid was losing, but it wasn't clear if that was the only issue, or maybe he just didn't want to play the game and he was starting to scream and yell. And I had just done a talk in Slovenia where I brought back these gold coins from Slovenia, and I had shown the kids these coins like earlier for some other reason. So in the middle of his meltdown, I whip out this gold coin. Hey man, did you see this coin? Wait, is this valuable? Did I give you one of these? Wait, come here for a second. And I get him away from the other kids, lure him away with a shiny gold coin. That's an example of a novel item. It averted a meltdown. I still didn't know at that moment why he was melting down, but I knew we had to just calm him. Another category, special interests, right? the children's passions that they have, their special interests, what Barry Prezant would call passions, these are the things that calm people, right? Every night before I go to bed, I listen to Words with Friends. It's boring and I cheat. And so it's really calming for me. As soon as I see the screen of Words with Friends, I'm totally calm because I know I'm going to look up things on, you know, Scrabble, Finder, and cheat and find some good words. So think about whether they're a Disney fan and you have a Disney book next to them or whatever it is their special interest, that might be the thing that calms them, right? And then sensory activities, a different kind of sensory input. And I have to tell you, we overlook this a lot of times because, you know, we don't think of it in this category, but our moms did it for us all our lives, right? In some ways. Food is a major sensory activity, sensory input. And I have a young adult group, and this woman often has had a fight with her mom before she comes to group. And she comes to group in a nasty mood, yelling at people, and cursing, and it's upsetting the other clients in the group. And it's like the commercial for Snickers. Does somebody need a Snickers bar? Now, I don't say that sarcastically, but we always have some snack at the end of the group. But when I see her in a mood like that, I just bring out my snacks, and sometimes without a word, I just give her a piece of chocolate. Her mood settles. And then she starts to talk about how she had an argument with her mom and how we could help her. But she sees me as no longer a threat. I'm the guy who gives chocolate. So you might say to me, but Dr. Baker, aren't we rewarding a tantrum when we do this? And I would say to you, yeah, that's possible. And here's where you might be rewarding a tantrum. When somebody's trying to avoid doing any work task, this is going to make, if you swoop in to watch, The Simpsons with them, right? Or SpongeBob or something, then that might reward the tantrum. They learn I scream and yell and I don't have to do my work. I can watch my favorite show. When that's the case, we don't want to run to distraction. What we want to do is simplify the work. Well, let's not do 5 problems. Let's just do 1. And we want to teach the kid to ask for a break. Hey, say I need a break. And then we can go watch The Simpsons for 5 minutes on a timer and then try to come back and do the work again. Okay. So when somebody's trying to avoid the work, we don't run to do distraction. We just simplify the work, teach them to ask for a break rather than have to tantrum for a break. But there are lots of times when you could go right to distraction. Like when a kid is sitting in class or at home and he thinks his brother or another student teased him just because the person looked at them, and they start to go off and they're going to kill him, but you distract him by playing their favorite game, and then he's fine. That's not rewarding a tantrum. I didn't go let him beat up his brother. I just got his mind off of it. Or you're out shopping and you've got your mask on and you've gone to the store and you're excited because he's been waiting to get a Twix bar for a week, and because you don't want to go to the store all the time in a pandemic, and you get there and they're out of the Twix bars, and he throws a tantrum, and you decide to instead give him his favorite music to hear, and you buy some bubble gum that he likes. Is that rewarding a tantrum? No, you didn't go to 10 other stores to get the Twix bar. That might have rewarded the tantrum. You just tried to get his mind off of it with music and some other activity. So all I'm talking about so far is crisis management, how to soothe in the moment. What we really want to do is create these prevention plans where we try to understand the big why. When a repeat problem occurs, we don't want to be Scarlett Johansson forever and just try to put out the fire. We want to ask, why is it happening? And I think the most important thing we can do to find out why it happens is to try to examine what the trigger was to the problem behavior. Now, behaviorists will talk about finding the ABCs to behavior: antecedent, behavior, consequence. We try to keep track of that: the before, the during, and the after. That's what antecedent, behavior, consequence means. Before, during, and after. Before, the actual behavior that was a problem, and what happened afterwards. Well, the before is the thing that triggered them. And when you know what the trigger is, you're in a good position to put a prevention plan together. And I'm going to give you a map of triggers, okay? And when you know what the trigger is, you go back in time, you say, was it this, was it this, was it this? You can have a little bit of a map of, for each trigger, what kind of prevention plan will I put together? I wrote No More Meltdown app because one of my books, No More Meltdowns, has an app that will allow you to sort of keep track of what the triggers are in real time as things happen. So a kid melts down or has a behavior and it asks you questions about what happened before and what happens after. So here's a list of triggers. The usual suspects and the things that set off our kids. And I'm going to go over the 3 that are highlighted and underlined because those are the ones that are really very much related to pandemic remote learning right now. But let's go over all of them for a second and then we'll focus in on those 3. So internal issues. Sometimes our kid is tired or hungry or ill or sick, and wherever they go, they're having more problem behavior. You know it's an internal issue if you see that everywhere they go, they're having more problems today. It wasn't just a reaction to trying to do a writing assignment, because if it was, that would just be a problem with writing. But it's everywhere they go all day long. They've had a higher level of problem behavior. So what's going on inside that kid today? Why is their mood in a different state? Have they not slept? Are they hungry? Are they having gastrointestinal issues? Like a lot of kids with autism can't tell you when they have GERD. They can't tell you when they have an ear infection or dental pain or headaches. But sometimes we can see signs if they're touching their head or they're pulling on their ear or they're belching a lot from GERD, right? So when we see that, we want to begin to ask those questions. Did they sleep okay? Could they be having some biological issue? You know what's very much like this? Highly aggressive behavior that seems to come out of the blue often is related to an internal, not always, but often related to an internal pain. If I'm sitting next to you and I'm in pain, I'm going to hit you. Does that sound like a family life to you? Right? When we're in pain, we take it out on the person next to us. So sometimes we want to investigate that. The next issue is sensory issues. Sometimes the trigger is being overwhelmed by too much visual information, too much sound information, also too much emotional information. Other kids' emotional reactions are often a trigger for our kids because emotions are contagious. So when someone else gets upset, your kid may get really upset, right? They may need a break from that stress. Years ago, by the way, in the schizophrenia literature, there was something called expressed emotion. The best predictor of having to return to the hospital for a psychotic break was when psychotic patients, schizophrenic patients, went home to families where there were high levels of expressed emotion. That's a fancy word for people at home would get upset a lot. And when there's a lot of upset at home, it triggers people to get into their symptoms again, right? Another sensory issue is just simply boredom. For a lot of our kids with ADHD, and also who lack a fair amount of like language processing skills, much of school is just dreadfully boring because a lot of it is we just talk at you and you don't get up and move and do fun things. And so we have to think about having a sensory diet, sensory breaks and such. The next 3 are really related to our pandemic, lack of structure. Well, you know, put a bunch of kids with challenging behaviors when they are in school and learning issues when they are in school and send them home to let the parents try to figure out how to sit on them so they can be on a laptop and interacting with a teacher who they're not really experiencing live and can't really show them with manipulatives in the same way. That's an equation for trouble, as you know. Lack of structure at home. Maybe there's not the same set of visual schedules and routines and such. Challenging work, right? Or fears and phobia. These are things that trigger upsetting behaviors, right? So difficult work. And, you know, almost all writing and reading work, which is the bulk of schoolwork. When you're doing math, you're reading and you're writing. And when you're doing language arts, you're certainly doing reading and writing. And sometimes any kind of reading and writing is going to set that kid off. Okay. Having to wait. Oh, fears. So it's fears of COVID, right? All of that can be a trigger. Having to wait or not get what you want. Disappointments, right? Unexpected changes in your schedule. Unexpected disappointments. These are things that set kids off. So we'll talk about how to deal with those. But I'm going to talk about it particularly in terms of COVID for this session, which is all of a sudden, all the things I like to do and the teachers I like to see, I don't get to see in the same way. My programming has been canceled or curtailed. I'm really disappointed. So we'll talk about those. And the other two we'll talk about next session, which are threats to self-esteem, things like losing a game or making a mistake or people criticizing or teasing you. And another category is like unmet wishes for attention, like little Joseph in the Super Nanny video, who when he doesn't get what he wants, he flips out. That's when he gets angry. So let's talk about COVID for a second. I'm sure you've all done this by now, but sometimes it has to be done over and over again. We have to explain how COVID impacts us. Look, I've got a 35-year-old client living at home with his elderly parents who they have to explain COVID to him for every month of this 8 months or 9 months that we've been in this, to explain how contagious it is, that the enemy is COVID. The enemy is not your dad who's not letting you go outside or not letting you go out without a mask or not letting you do things to like see your girlfriend. It's a big issue for him. So we explain what we need to do. We have to wear a mask and why, right? There's the Autism Society of America, ASA, has a picture story of sort of explaining the virus to kids who have less language. So you may have to do that over and over again, right? But what happens when we explain it is there's fallout. Some of our kids are going to be very anxious that they might get sick, their loved ones would get sick, and what will happen to us. So the anxiety around COVID that all of us feel, every time the news, CNN comes out, a new variant, we all get anxious. New variant, will the vaccines be effective? Will our antibodies be effective for those of us who had COVID? We get anxious. The next issue is frustration over restrictions, not getting to do what you normally got to do, not getting to go to restaurants, not getting to go to your, I've got a bunch of kids who are in the Special Olympics, and most of it's been canceled. Some of it is not. Some of it they did outside when it was okay with masks, but they didn't play games. They just practiced. Let's talk about anxiety management here. So we're going to talk about it next session too, but I'm going to talk about it related to COVID right now. Number one, it's really important for all of us and our kids to know that some of the anxiety symptoms, when we have that Incredible Hulk alarm system in our bodies, that is our emotional alarm system. And when it goes off, it can cause shortness of breath, a tight feeling, rapid heartbeat. These look often like symptoms of COVID too. And so it's really important to educate people that not every shortness of breath, tight feeling in your chest, dizziness is a major symptom of anxiety. Not all of that is going to be COVID. A fair amount of that could be anxiety. Well, of course, we want to check it out. And like most of my neurotic friends, I bought an oximeter. I have it at home. I put it on my finger. I check my oxygen. And if I can tell if I'm having a panic attack or my oxygen is low. And generally, if I'm nervous and anxious, my oxygen is just fine. Okay? So that's important to educate people that they have this alarm reaction, but sometimes we have false alarms, right? We can check it out, but we often have false alarms. We teach people to think like a scientist to combat unrealistic worries, right? There's a lot to be worried about with COVID, but we don't want to have unrealistic worries that stop us from doing things. Like I have many kids who refuse to go outside at all, and that's probably not healthy, right? To be outside, distance from people with a mask is good. So when this is called cognitive behavior therapy. How do we combat your worry with realistic thinking? Combat anxious thinking with realistic thinking. There are 2 questions that I have my verbal kids. So right now I'm talking about verbal kids, right? This piece is for verbal kids. The education about false alarms is for verbal kids. Think like a scientist is for verbal kids. 2 questions we ask them. Overestimating the probability of something bad happening, right? Are you overestimating the probability of something bad happening? Like getting COVID. Are you overestimating the probability of getting COVID? Well, it turns out with masks that really form a seal, being distant from people, these are really effective ways to prevent getting COVID. Limiting all the things you already know. Overestimating the severity of getting COVID, right? So if we look at some of the actual risks by age, there are certainly, from a population point of view, kids who get really ill and even die, and yet the risk to any individual kid is pretty low in terms of the severity. And if they've had COVID, or if and when they get the vaccine, it looks like they prevent some severe illness too, even if when other variants come, perhaps. So it's important to be able to look at how to think like a scientist in order to do this. Oops, not letting me go to the next slide. I put a think like a scientist cue card together to help them gradually face their fear. So this kid was refusing to go outside, he'll get COVID, and we talked about how to go outside safely. And in fact, exercise will be good for him outside. He was worried that he would die, and we talked about the probability of death or hospitalization for people his age without comorbid conditions and such. And all of this was to get him to be able to gradually, what we call gradual exposure. Maybe he goes outside within 5 feet from his house for a moment where no one else is around. And maybe he stays out there for 5 minutes. Then maybe he does it for 10 minutes, then for 15 minutes, and so on. And so we have him gradually face this fear. Use the Think Like a Scientist cue card to do that. For less verbal kids, we need to think about other ways to help reduce their anxiety, because we can't just use the power of logical persuasion. Exercise, for all of us, is a great anxiety reducer. Aerobic exercise, 30 minutes plus a day, has a profound impact for a 3-4 hour window, reducing our anxiety. Meditation. And meditation means a lot of things to a lot of people. It's really about being able to focus in on something so that you're not in the moment, so that you're not reflecting negatively on the past or anxiously awaiting the future. And there are formal types of meditation, like if you go to fragrantheart.com, that is a free website that you can give to your clientele and you can use. And they have these, I use the ones for kids there. They're free little 6-7 minute guides of, deep breathing and progressive muscle relaxation. They're meditation guides. For kids who are much less verbal, we find that spa music itself is calming. Music, I don't know if you guys have been watching Fran Lebowitz. She's got a new Netflix thing out, and I love Fran Lebowitz. Anyway, she was talking about, like, music is one of these weird things to manage our emotions. How many times do you find something that has an immediate impact on your mood and is, like, not bad for you? Like, too much sweets has an immediate impact on your mood, but it's not great for you. Alcohol and drugs have an immediate impact and it's not really bad for you. Music has an immediate impact on people's moods and it's not bad for you. So there's a song called Weightless by Marconi Union. And this little song, Weightless by Marconi Union, was the subject of a British study, and they found when people listened to it, there's no words to it, it lowered their blood pressure because it was actually created to mimic about the pace of your heartbeat and slowly slow it down. And so it's the most chill music out there, and it's scientifically studied to lower your blood pressure. But what I want you to think about is the special interests and passions of your kids with autism are meditative activities. They are meditations. So a kid who, now they can also be agitating. Video games can go both ways, right? You can get agitated if you have trouble with losing and you're frustrated that your partners on the video game aren't doing what you told them to do and you're shouting and screaming. But otherwise, certain interests that your kids with autism have, their passions, are meditations, and we want to schedule time for them to do that in a regular way throughout the day to keep them regulated. And finally, medications can be another way to handle anxiety, and they don't have to be permanent. So I've had a lot of kids who used medication, particularly the antidepressants, SSRIs, which are also good anti-anxiety medicines. I've had them use it temporarily to begin to face a fear. And once they gradually face their fear and they found nothing bad happened, like this kid with fears of going outside because of COVID finally was able to go outside safely with a mask, distant from others, not in crowded areas. We can often take him off the medicine after a while, and we find that the exposure itself was enough to keep him doing that. So what about the issue of staying at home, having to maybe and wear the mask and not see people in the way you used to see them? So for verbal individuals, I've often used the concept of being a hero. And I'm going to use the concept of this, this wasn't a kid, this was a 35-year-old guy I mentioned to you with autism, living at home with his parents, and he had a girlfriend. She had Down syndrome, and they were boyfriend and girlfriend, and all of a sudden he couldn't make out with her anymore, and he was pretty frustrated, and he blamed his parents, and I kept helping him to sort of shift the blame to COVID, and we would beat up pictures of COVID rather than beat up your father. But we talked about him being heroic, that by staying away from his girlfriend, he was assuring that he and her would be safe, so that when they're both vaccinated or they're both tested and quarantined for 2 weeks, then they could see each other safely, right? And in fact, that is what ultimately happened. We let them see each other. The parents let them see each other after getting tested and quarantining for a couple weeks. He said, well, I don't care about keeping my parents safe. So you have to tap into who they do care about. So he cared about his girlfriend, but not his parents. So we kind of linked doing the right things, the safety precautions, to care about your girlfriend. We gave him alternatives, right? He could certainly video chat and Zoom chat his girlfriend, and we really needed to keep him occupied. So the parents ended up caving in and buying him a new, I forget what the game system was. So this way he could have one in his room, and he had another one down in the basement. And that kept him more occupied. And they finally this programming got back and going. So he had school, if you will, the kind of programming he used to have. And also takeout food was another pleasure that he missed. And so that was an alternative to seeing his girlfriend, another decent pleasure. And music, okay? And we also explained to his parents that he was in a process of grief, that the pandemic has created a grief process for many of us. And that's useful to explain to parents and to think about for ourselves, because some of our kids are just in denial. There is no COVID. I could just go out and hug people and do what I normally did. And if we can do enough education, the denial eventually, diminishes, and then we see anger and sadness. Anger that we can't do these, like, I get it, I can't see them, I gotta wear a mask, but I'm angry about it. And I'm sad about it. And then that ultimately can lead to acceptance, which is, I accept that that's my new reality, and now I'm going to have to problem solve around it. So maybe I can make out with my girlfriend if I get a test, PCR test, and wait 2 weeks, and then I can go. Okay. When everything else fails, we go back to our distraction. When logic fails, distract. And so sometimes, no matter what we said to this guy, he was hitting his father at home, just hitting him, beating him up. And he's a big guy. He's 35. He's not 3.5. He's 35. And so at those moments, they would just have to get up a video game, turn it on, help him, redirect him into an activity he likes till he calms, and then they would have a logical conversation with him later. What are we doing with all our kids at home? Now, Mark, you help me out, but all the kids are remote or it's hybrid? Oh, I don't hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me now? So it depends on the school and the geographic location. So some schools are back in fully remote, some are still hybrid, and some, I'm sorry, so some are full back in person, excuse me, some are hybrid, and some are fully remote. So it's really, it's per school.
All right, so let me just talk about the kids who are home, right? They need what they had in school a little bit, which is a visual schedule, right? And so you can go on, Autism Society for America's site or Autism Speaks websites for good examples of visual schedules. But I think some of the best examples are to take photographs of the different activities and put them in order. And you can put digital times on them if your kid can tell time. You don't have to do the whole school day, right? But what you want in a visual schedule, and by the way, it doesn't have to be adhered to in some kind of rigid way. It's just a general expectation. So there's some expectation, some sense of what the kid is going to do today, because without any structure, kids find not great things to do sometimes. Like when my sister and I baked a cake for my mom's birthday on the guest bed with any ingredients that we thought tasted good. So I happen to love ketchup, and my sister likes some other things, and we just put it all on the bedspread, mixed it up, and we called it a cake. Had we had an arts and crafts table at home, perhaps that wouldn't have happened with a schedule of when we were doing arts and crafts. What would a good schedule look like? You should have some schoolwork in there, so there's some kind of remote learning time, but there's some social life in there. When are they going to have a Zoom chat with their classmates or play a game online with their classmates? There should be some physical exercise as part of your schedule to get up and move the body. At every age, moving the body is good for your mind and your body. And then some sort of comfort routines that you do at home. One of our comfort routines when my kids were younger was watching American Idol. It was American Idol. And so our routine was we'd have dinner so we could, we'd all help to make dinner quickly so we'd get to American Idol on time. And then in every commercial, we would act out different acts. And we would pretend to be judges. And that's what our routine was. And it was a family comfort routine that made us all feel sort of soothed and safe in a way. My wife was J-Lo, and I was often Randy. And I'd have to say, dog, that was good. All right. The hardest part of your schedule is getting people to do tasks that they don't want to do, like school. Most of school, not all, is non-preferred activities. How do you get people to do non-preferred activities? First of all, if you're at home, you can't recreate the whole day of school. You don't have to recreate the whole day of school. You've got to work with your teachers to find what's a meaningful amount of work to be doing. And then we use, the old Premack principle, reward behavior system is to use preferred activities as a reward for less preferred ones. What does that mean? Do something you don't like math, before getting a chance to play, right? And so you can't make, hours of math before 5 minutes of play. So it's gotta be a reasonable time limit, a short period of time. How do we make managing these non-preferred school tasks more interesting in and of themselves? Not that you have to just reward people, like, yeah, you can bribe kids with money and game time and video games to do this stuff, do this, and then you can play a video game. But how do you make the task itself, more fun? Well, one of the ways is to just make it look less threatening. One of the biggest and simplest things we can do as parents at home is when a kid is sitting for a 40-minute class or 30-minute class, and you're a mom, and I have a lot of these moms as my clients and dads who like have to get the kid on a laptop so then they can go do a conference call. We say to that kid, you don't have to do all 30 minutes. I want you to just start with 5 minutes. And then if you need a break, you could take it. Because sometimes if kids just know they don't have to do the whole thing, they start. And once they get started, sometimes they end up doing the whole thing, but it's just hard to get started because it looks too big. It's a whole day of sitting at the laptop, and that's freaking them out. And so you just say, no, we're just going to do 5 minutes to start. We're just going to do this activity to start, okay? But we can also make those activities more fun. I have to say, you know, your fearless leader, Mark Corallo, is one of the best at making those things fun. And so he's got really good ideas always, like when we talk about like language, you know, I remember one of the things, I was in a conference with you, Mark, and you can say it better than me, but just to get kids to sort of begin to read out loud and sound out their words or try to put sentences together, you had them, I think, hiding different messages around the house, and they had to find it. And when you could put it all together, it maybe spelled out a sentence about where like a special snack or reward was hidden or something like that.
Yeah, that's what we did.
That sound reasonable? Okay.
That sounds reasonable.
So that's a perfect example of that. I did a lot of doing sort of cooking stuff with my kids in order to teach them math. My daughter hated math, but she loves to bake. And now she's pretty darn good at math, basic math now, because she figures out how to double recipes and triple recipes. And by the way, if you want some cookies, you can find her website. It's a gratuitous advertisement, but all right, I won't do that because she doesn't officially have a license to do that. Anyway, so besides making it fun and making it less scary by shortening the amount, model it before you ask them to do it. Show people how to do it. Certain kids, you should never test them to see what they know and don't know, and then figure out what you need to teach them. When I was a kid, our math curriculum worked that way. They tested all the kids, and whatever kids didn't understand, that was what they were going to have lessons on. And the problem was there were certain kids that when you tested them and they failed and they knew that now they were going to have to learn it, they lost all motivation for math. I suck at this. I'm no good. I'm not going to do it. Don't let certain kids fail at all. Show them how to do it all before you have them do it. For those kids who are going to be sensitive that way, 80-20 rule is a similar idea. Give them 80% of the work that they can do easily before the 20% that's difficult. So if you have some kids who you know are going to pop off your remote learning session with them, don't start out with the hardest problem. Start out with the one you know they'll be successful, they can feel good about, they can feel confident, they can feel like they're doing a good job. Do 8 of those for every 2 that then at the end you add that are difficult. And you tell them, these are really hard. You may not be able to do it, but you can ask for help. You can try first. And then the last thing for your verbal kids is you got to teach them about growth mindset. You've got to combat their tendency to think they're stupid when they don't understand something. All kids, many kids, think they're just dumb if they don't understand things. And what we need to shift that and help them understand. If you don't understand something, that's because we haven't taught it yet. You're not supposed to know it. You learn over time. And that's what Carol Dweck's growth mindset is about. And I'm going to show you that, and then one other slide and take questions. Carol Dweck's mindset concept is this. The way kids think about their abilities, like intelligence, can make them either very motivated or make them sort of depressed and feel bad about themselves. A fixed mindset is not the way to go. The fixed mindset is the idea that you're just born with a certain level of intelligence. It doesn't really change. Kids who believe that, they don't want to do any difficult tasks. They prefer easy tasks, because if they do a difficult task and they mess up on it, they feel like they're not smart enough, right? Because they were just born with a certain amount of intelligence from their viewpoint. Fixed mindset, unchanging intelligence. If they make a mistake, they lose the motivation. I'm no good. I'm not smart. They don't want to ask for or accept help, because somehow the idea of help means they're incompetent. They're not smart enough. If I need help, then I'm somehow not good enough. And they have lower learning outcomes because they're not trying difficult work. They're not persisting after making a mistake. They're not reaching out for assistance or accepting help. So they don't do as well. People who have a growth mindset, right? We can teach our kids. Growth mindset means your intelligence changes by trying things you don't know how to do, and you won't know how to do them, and you'll make a mistake, and then you get help. Effort and willingness to get help are the keys to everything in life. And I have to say this to myself over and over again in all kinds of different ways. Whatever it is you want to get good at, if you engage in it, you're going to mess up. And if you get help, you'll learn it. You'll get better at it. You may not be the greatest at it, but you'll get better at it. So this is a concept I always teach all my special needs kids, that you're not supposed to know how to do this work. And so all we really want you to do is try it and ask for help if you need it, or I'll show you how to do it. You're not dumb if you don't know how to do it. The smartest people in my class are going to be the ones who say, I don't get it. Can you show me? Can you help me? And so this is what I'm doing with my kids who are home during remote learning. A large part of what's going on for them is if they are presented with material on a laptop, no one's really been able to explain it in the same way as they could at school, and they don't get it. They just want to drop off online. So sometimes the parents at home or the helpers at home have to say, you're not supposed to know everything on the laptop. You come to me and ask for help, and I'll help you. We'll figure it out. We'll do it together, right? Let those kids know that they can get your help. So when you're going back to school, my colleague James Ball had an interesting PDF he put out, and if I find it, I can give it to you, Mark, if you'd like. So, and by the way, all these slides we can give to your participants, okay, Mark? I'll send you a PDF after this. You're on mute, so we can't hear you.
It's great that I am talking to everyone muted. Yeah, I'll make sure that I get that out to everybody. Thanks, Jed.
Okay. So what James Ball was talking about was at home, before you go back to school, you're establishing school-like routines so they get used to it. They get used to their visual schedule, the types of activities. So they try to mimic the school day, full on with little work and sensory breaks, wearing a mask, social distancing. I found this, I thought was useful, a picture video lesson for mask wearing on the CincinnatiChildren's.org website. So that's you can use that if you like. I think it's a good explanation for kids about how to wear their mask, and of course, you know, giving them a choice in what mask they wear and how they wear them. I really want to wear these KN95 masks, but I don't know if my head is just bigger than other people, but it kills my ears. So I got to get some sort of attachment so I don't have to do it around on my ears. Otherwise, Emma, I have sensory issues.
Come here, please.
You can do a video session with the anticipated teachers and safety people, so they know who their go-to person is when they go back to school, and a calendar countdown of when they're going to return, although that may always be up in the air sometimes. And then when they do return, we want them to first have fun. So where they're not going to return to the most dreadful work, you want them to return to some of the most preferred activities in school. So they say, like, I like being in school. I want to be in school. And I remember having a kid who, you know, the only way to get him back into school was we started out by just letting him do music and film stuff. No reading or writing at all. And then once we got him going and he was working on a script, we turned the script into reading and writing. And you know, we're able to slowly get him to do other stuff. So that's it. Session 2 we'll do next week. But let me take any questions you may have of anything you heard tonight or anything that's on your mind right now. My little face doing this is trying to read.
Can you hear me, Jed?
I hear you.
Sure. So first of all, I want to thank you so much for doing this. I think it's great. You know, we have variety of people here who I think this message could be messaged out, you know, across the districts beyond District 75. I think there are a lot of parents and I think this information is useful for not only our kids, but for families, parents, caregivers, therapists, teachers who sometimes feel the pressure and the anxiety of trying to meet the needs um, of our kids during a difficult time. And a lot of what you discussed is very much of reality of what's happening in the home for families. And keeping reminding people to keep in mind that these strategies can also be used for themselves. I know sometimes we have parents who are very stressed and they feel that they can't pack in everything that they want to do during the day, or that they're faced with challenging schedules and they're not able to have their children log on to all of the sessions that they need to, or the children are demonstrating behavioral challenges while they're interfacing with their teachers. Parents are not trained in a lot of the strategies that we went to school for, and we're now asking them to be teachers and social workers and psychologists.
And let me say this, not everybody has the, and forgive me for being a New Yorker and interrupting you, but that's how I was bred, which is that not everybody can do this, right? But if parents are going to work and do this at the same time, it sure would be nice if they had a partner, a helper, a mother's helper, a college kid, someone. I mean, a lot of people looking for extra cash who are willing to put on a KN95 mask and are a little bit lower risk as younger people maybe. So I have a lot of situations here out in the suburbs, certainly, where we've got like college kids who are remote going to help, or high school kids going to help younger kids, and sitting while a parent can do a conference call or do work to help them stay online, kind of thing.
Great.
So there's that. And I also wanted just to give you guys, while you're thinking of questions here, like a little commercial for next session. So what I didn't do today, and I want to do next session with you, is talk about handling sort of having to wait for things, use of timers and schedules for that, accepting no when you can't have one thing, maybe you could have something else. A little bit more on sort of modifying work, and how to get attention in positive ways, sort of teaching kids less provocative or upsetting ways to get people's attention. Dealing with certain sensory issues, how they can be good self-advocates for themselves. And also sort of, being able to sort of not impose their sensory issues on everybody. Taking care of themselves, basically, without necessarily imposing on everybody. So those are some of the issues we'll talk about next time. Let's see. Many high school students have been required in the past to do community service. In New York City, school-age students are eligible for services through
OPWDD.
Yeah, that include community habilitation. So this is a comment question.
Betsy?
Oh, I see. This is maybe in response to being able to help somebody with remote learning when a parent has to work.
Yes, a lot of the times OPWDD can provide individuals with additional support in the home. And so one of the things that we try to do at the school-based level, particularly from the Office of Autism, and my dear friend Betsy is actually the one who made that comment. So thank you, Betsy.
I'm on.
Hi, Betsy. So, is OPWDD, Betsy can definitely speak to it better than I can, but often provides opportunities for families to have care and support when needed through the Office of Individuals with Developmental Disabilities. Can you speak to that a little bit, Betsy?
Sure. So there are organizations, well, we'll start with the first half first. For, high school students, I don't know if the schools are still doing it, but several of the private high schools have required students to do community service. So that's a really good way for a family to get someone to come in, whether they have to pay them or not, to help, an hour a week or 2 hours a week to come into the home and interact with their young adult or young person with special needs. So that's a resource right there. Also, I mean, I don't know about the colleges. Most of the colleges and certainly all the CUNYs are remote. So we're reaching out to the colleges may be another resource that families haven't thought about. As for OPWDD, that includes a Medicaid waiver. It's a process to go through. A lot of our families are doing it. Our parent coordinators in the school are well aware of the process and going through the front door to help the families do it. And I think in New Jersey and out on Long Island, you may not be able to get those services until you're 18 or over.
Right.
In New York City, they allow you, I think, as young as 3 or 4 to qualify for those services. And certainly that's another great resource because there are a lot of services that go along with that. One being Community Hub, where a person can get paid to come into your home, or even working Zoom, or video, I should say, to interface and interact with your person with special needs.
Well, that may help our next questioner here, who had a parent who's having a child, having trouble getting the child to sit for the remote session. So having somebody come to the house could be very helpful. But I will also like to respond to her question by saying this. We got to help her sort of ask that why question. What is it about sitting on the remote session? And we can all know there's a lot of reasons. It's a long day just sitting, and it's not as engaging as being in school. But I will tell you 2 issues that I've seen for most of the kids I've been working with. One has just been sort of the frustrating nature of the work. They're not sure they understand it. Especially around reading and writing and sort of language-based stuff. And so the extent to which that work can be highly modified, shrunken down, put all the easy stuff first so they can be really successful with it, so they're not intimidated when they first sit down to the screen that they're about to do this activity that's difficult. And having someone who can help them with it. So as soon as they get frustrated, they don't disappear, but they know, oh, I can get a little help. My mom will help me do this, or this person coming in will help me do this. The other major issue that I've seen for many of my kids has been the embarrassment of being seen on the video and all the other kids looking at them. And so I think it's important to see that as an anxiety issue and to do what we do for anxiety issues, which is gradual exposure. So at first you can have your video off, right? And then maybe you have your video on, and you answer questions just with a verbal gesture, a thumbs up or a thumbs down or something simple. And then maybe you graduate to maybe a verbal response, yes or no, or a more involved response. Maybe the teacher gives you the question privately, if it's a verbal student, through a chat before they ask it to you in front of the other kids, so you already see it and you know what you want to do with it. So just think about it. It's kind of a form of selective mutism. But a lot of our kids are just embarrassed about being seen, because when they're in school, sometimes they can sit in a certain part of the room. Not everybody sees them. They can kind of blend in. And all of a sudden they're on this video, like here, everybody's looking at them. Anyway, point is, we got to get to the bottom of why it's happening.
Yeah, and I think to the second question, we also see this issue for parents as well, where they sometimes are embarrassed about letting us into their home, or they sometimes feel like they're doing something wrong. In the Office of Autism, we have the opportunity to observe children in their homes, and a lot of the times parents are apologizing to us for their child's behavior, or if they don't have specific tools that they need to support them in the areas of communication or behavior modification. And a lot of the times what we've been working on with specific teachers is just sort of applying some of Jed's strategies. So for example, like if you think about the 80-20 rule, or like how can you empower that parent in helping them to understand their child's disability a little bit more and making learning fun, because a lot of the times we give them directives that come directly from curriculum or content or academics. So that's when we think about non-preferred activities. And if we're not able to get them actively engaged, and parents have a hard time understanding how to engage their child or get them to engage to a computer screen, then we have to think about a larger picture of, okay, well, how and where do we start? And that most likely 90% of the time is starting with the parent and making them feel good and seeing what types of supports they do have or what supports could be in place for them. And then again, implementing gradual exposure. So maybe they're not on the computer screen for a full half hour, maybe they're on for 5 minutes, and that's really successful for the family, you know, and then you build on that and helping to build not only the child's ability to start to attend with you, but then you're also creating that relationship with parents that we never really had the opportunity to do before, now that we're remote. If that helps. Any other questions? We have 5 minutes, so we're, you know, anything that comes to mind, please feel free to reach out or ask.
Parents or professionals, and you know, realize that my area is in, you know, challenge behaviors, and I do a lot of social skills training. So specifically about how do you teach reading, writing, and arithmetic is not necessarily what I do, but thinking about general ways that we modify those, I'm always involved in some way.
Jed is very good at modifying. And that's really, I think, what the takeaway is, you know, for today's talk, is to just think about the fact that we need to modify. The fact is the world is not functioning as it normally does, and you know, we're all in a situation right now where, you know, particularly for our district, I think we are trying to operate in or trying to create a sense of normalcy as much as we possibly can in a world that is certainly filled with constant change. And so to think about the key factors that Dr. Baker talked about today, particularly in the areas of anxiety or triggers or depression, and how you can utilize these specific strategies, not only for the students, but for ourselves as well. Because if we don't take care of ourselves, we are not going to then be able to put the supports in place that we need. And that's what's most important.
I will say a couple things about remote learning is, you know, you got to be very careful about being critical of kids remotely, because they'll just, you know, turn the video off, or they'll just dump out of the Zoom session. It's not like when they're in your classroom. I'm talking as if I was a teacher now. But the one good thing about Zoom is when you have kids that disrupt each other, I frequently have to, you know, I can sort of temporarily mute somebody, which I can't do live in a classroom, but I can certainly do on Zoom. And I always say, you know, oh, I'm just muting you for a second because we have to be respectful. We can't say this to the other person. I'm going to unmute you now. If you make sure you can't, you know, you're not going to say that again. And then if they say it again, I might have to mute them. But it does afford a little bit of a way of managing stuff that you can't always do in the classroom. That's the one plus. And I find that if I have interactive games, and sometimes I have kids who are on a laptop, and we'll play, you know, well, some of my older social skill groups, we play Psyched by Ellen DeGeneres. It's one of these apps. And so some of these interactive games we can do is a nice way, you know, to interact. And video lessons, so often we have video modeling lessons, but I know you can do video lessons for, you know, for math and science and social studies as well. It's a good format for video lessons.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Thank you, Dr. Baker, as always. we look forward to our next session.
Sounds good, Mark. I appreciate it. Thanks for being out there. And listen, the more you guys give, the more I can give back, because if I don't hear from you, I don't know where you're at. I won't know if I'm saying what's relevant to you. So if you join me next time, think of some issues you're dealing with, bring them to the workshop, and we can kind of zero in on those things. See you
Thank
next
you,
time
everyone.
if you're coming.
Okay, thanks. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right, bye-bye.